Hey friends, Matt aka Martiln here, and in this video I want to show you how you can create a cool sub-drop sound using Ableton Live's Drift synthesizer, which is a synthesizer that comes in every single edition of Ableton Live, from light all the way through to sweet. So no matter what edition of Ableton Live you have, you should be able to recreate this sound, as long as you've got the most recent version of Ableton Live 11. Without any further ado, let's jump right in and show you how to create the sound. Okay, so here in Ableton Live, I have a new live set open up. I've just deleted all the other tracks. I have a MIDI track and I've loaded up the Drift synthesizer onto this MIDI track. This is just the default version of the Drift synthesizer. And in order to create the sound that we're going to try and create here, the sub-drop sound, first we just want to have a single oscillator. So I'm going to turn down oscillator 2's level, and we're also going to remove any of the kind of modulation going on in any of the other sections. For instance, I'm going to remove this slide modulation here attached to the shape of oscillator 1 just by double clicking on it. And I'm going to do the same thing with the press modulation on the frequency control. Just for the sake of it, I'm also going to turn down the velocity to volume modulation all the way over in the right-hand side to 0%, so that the velocity isn't modulating the volume of the output of the synthesizer at all. So now we should have just a basic sawtooth wave playing. So next, what we're going to do is set our oscillator type here to a sine wave, which is the very first wave option. And I'm going to bring it down 2 octaves in the octave chooser here. So now we have the lowest possible sine wave that we can be playing, and it also just means that we can play kind of in the middle of the range of the keyboard and have this sine wave sound lower as well, which is useful for the type of sound we're wanting to create. Next, we need to set our envelopes. So I'm going to actually go to envelope 1 here, and I'm going to pull down the release of this envelope so that it stops as soon as the sound stops. I'm actually going to give it a little bit of release here so that there's not a huge click at the end. There we go, that's a little bit better. I'm also going to bring up the sustain here because we want the sub drop to last for as long as we hold down the note. You could also reduce the sustain here and control the length of the sub drop with the decay control, but we can cover that later on. For now, let's reset the decay control and bring our sustain all the way up to 100%. So now we have a fully sustaining sine wave. Next, the thing that we want to do to actually make this sound like a sub drop or like a pitch drop is to reduce the sustain of envelope 2 here all the way down to 0, attack to 0 as well, and then we can use the decay control of envelope 2 to control the depth of modulation to the pitch of the synthesizer. To do this, I'm going to go over to the bottom left where there's the pitch mod section, how it says envelope 2, leave that to envelope 2 and drag this amount all the way up to 100%. And now you hear the pitch of this synthesizer start really high and go really low. And the decay parameter of envelope 2 is going to control the length of this pitch drop. So a longer decay, and if we play down an octave, we also get a bit of a better pitch drop. And if we want to add even more of a pitch drop to this sound, we can also have envelope 2 modulate this pitch again in this same pitch mod section. So I can go here again to this pitch mod section, and where it says LFO, I can change this drop-down menu to envelope 2, and then again adjust this modulation depth amount here to have envelope 2 control the pitch or the depth of the pitch modulation twice on the same parameter. Again, we can go down an octave as well. We can pull down the frequency control. Let's change our mode here to mono and increase the output level of oscillator 1 to 0 decibels. And if we want to, if we're using this low pass filter, we can also have the envelope 2 control the frequency cutoff position of this low pass filter by going to frequency mod, envelope 2 and increasing this here. And this just allows the filter frequency to follow basically the envelope as well, so that it kind of doesn't lose out on any of these kind of higher pitched sounds. And now again, we can control the depth of this or the amount of pitch modulation that we're applying with these 2 mod amounts right here in the bottom left. Again, if you want the length of the subdrop to be kind of predetermined, we can actually reduce the sustain on envelope 1 here and have the decay of envelope 1 match the decay of envelope 2. Let's set this to, again, about 7 to 8 seconds. And now the sound is going to decay in amplitude at the same rate as it decays in pitch. You might want to have the decay in envelope 1 just a little bit longer than it is in envelope 2 to make sure that you get the end of the sound, which is that kind of really low rumbling subtone that you probably want from a sound like this. So in this case, let's just increase the decay a little bit. And there we have it. We have our kind of really simple subdrop sound. Now, there are a few things that we can do to kind of edit this sound. We can obviously change the waveform shape. I could change it to, say, a triangle wave. I could change it to maybe a sawtooth wave if I want a really gritty sound. Or we can change it back to a sine wave and play around with the shape control as well. You can even sacrifice a little bit of the overall pitch drop for some extra knock at the start by using the LFO to control the pitch of the sound as well. To do that, we can actually go to the pitch mod here, set our envelope 2 for the first time all the way up to 100%, and now move our second modulator to be our LFO, set that to 100%. And now we're actually going to go to the LFO section here, and instead of it being on a sine wave, I'm going to come down and change it to exponential envelope, which now basically turns our LFO into a single one-shot triggered envelope, which we can then use to control the pitch of the sound. What we want for this is a really short and fast envelope to make a much more knocky kind of sound at the beginning of this subdrop. In order to make this more audible, I'm also going to reduce the attack of envelope 1 so that the sound begins immediately. And now you'll hear we have much more of a knock at the beginning of the sound. Let's increase the rate of the LFO here so we get that knock. And now let's reduce the decay of envelope 2. And this is obviously really good for creating 808 kind of style sounds as well, but we'll keep it in this kind of subdrop range for now. And of course, from here, you can adjust any of the parameters to change the sound of this subdrop to suit your track or whatever other kind of project you're working in. And you can, of course, add this to a rack and add some macro controls so that you can easily bring it into any new projects or even save it as part of your default template, which is exactly what I've done here. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, I'd love to invite you to leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new, and if you're really enjoying this video, why not consider supporting me by heading on over to my Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can support me by buying me a coffee, downloading some cool things from my shop, like the subdrop rack that I'm about to show you, and also become a member on a monthly basis and support me like that. Also, if you want to learn how to create your very own music in Ableton Live, I'll leave a link down below to where you can check out my online course that teaches you all the fundamentals of everything you need to know about creating your own music using Ableton Live that you can translate to other digital audio workstations as well. Okay, so here I've loaded up Martiln's subdrop rack onto a new MIDI track, and by default, this is what it sounds like. You can see we have some controls here for attack and decay, which control basically the envelope, the amplitude attack, so how long it takes for the sound to fade in, and then the pitch decay here with the decay control. We have the amount of pitch decay controlled with the pitch amount control, and then there's a little bit of extra knock, which I've applied using the LFO method that I showed kind of at the end there with this extra knock control. So I could have like no extra knock and a lot of pitch amount, or just add a little bit of that extra knock back in. We could slow down the decay, have it basically attack immediately. You've also got the ability here to change the wave shape. This just cycles through the different wave shapes available in Oscillator 1 in Drift. Which can end up with, of course, some really gnarly sounds. We have the ability to change that shape parameter of Oscillator 1 that we were playing around with before, which does different things based on the wave shape that you have set. And lastly, we have a drive control and an output control. The drive control is really useful to add some extra grit and just kind of input drive to the sound, especially if you're on a less harmonically dense waveform like the sine wave or the triangle wave. And then the output control is really useful because The way that I've set up this sub drop, if we open up the rack here and open up the instrument rack and open up the drift, we can see that we have the envelope 1 of drift, which is our amplitude envelope, set to 100% sustain. And what that means is that as I hold down the note, you'll see that when the sub drop has actually finished dropping in pitch, we still get this really low sustaining frequency. And although we might not be able to hear that frequency, it's still adding energy to our track and taking up some space. And so why this output control here is useful is we can use it to actually automate the level of the sub drop so that we can have it end or fade out in exactly the right way that we want to in whatever track we're working in. So for example, I've taken that exact same sub drop sound, switched over to arrangement view and created a 4-bar long MIDI clip of a single note playing C1. And here, if I play this C1 note, you'll see that the sound continues to sustain whilst the MIDI is actually sustaining and then stops at the end there. So by having this output control, I can actually right click on this, show the automation in a new lane, and then I can just fade out this sound using automation by selecting the range that I want, maybe to say here, right click and go down to this curve option, the second from the bottom right, is click and add a new breakpoint. And now the sound will fade out over the course of this period of time here, all the way to negative infinity right at the end of the sound. And this way we can really have our sub drops nice and clean and exactly the way that we want them in the track we're working on. Again, if you want to download that sub drop rack for yourself, I'll leave a link down in the description below where you can grab it from my Buy Me a Coffee page. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Check out this video right here for more cool synthesis techniques. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video.